Chris Stevens.
Well, thank you, Mr Rosendale. It's a pleasure, as always, to see you in the chair. And I'm sure you would agree with me that what we've heard today is a debate which is the best traditions of the House. A powerful and emotional debate, and I think first-class arguments being used by honourable members who have raised the issues so far. And I want to say that my heart certainly goes out to those in the public gallery, and of course my good friend who represents Bootle, for the most tragic circumstances that they've found themselves in, because that's what the petitions before us today deal with, is those most tragic of circumstances. It's really difficult to imagine how hard it must be to deal with the grief of losing a child or sibling in this way and still feel that justice has not been served. Because it's the concept of justice that's the heart of these petitions. Now, it's perfectly acceptable for all of us to have differing opinions on what justice is. For some, it's the right punishment for those who have committed a harm to another. For others, it's a chance to get answers and to hear an explanation or an apology. It can, of course, be a combination of both, but the fundamental principle lies in the perpetrator of the crime being held to account. And the understandable frustration in the petitions before us today arise from the feelings that neither of these concepts are fulfilled when a person flees the scene of an incident. The Road Traffic Act 1988, as we've heard, deals with failing to stop or report an accident and dangerous and careless driving offences. The two fundamental sections engaged in incidents of hit and run. As both petitions suggest, there is a gulf of disparity between the sentencing guidelines for failure to stop after an incident and for death by dangerous or careless driving. And as we've heard, the former being a maximum 6-month custodial sentence and the latter being between 5 to 14 years custodial sentence. The Government have reiterated in their responses to the petition that failure to stop offences are more often than not low-level traffic incidents such as the clipping of a mirror, the scuffling of a bumper in a car park, for example. However, on occasions where the failure to stop or report relates to an incident which leads to the death or serious injury of another person, then this can be an aggravating factor in the sentencing decisions. The question before us today, Mr Rosendale, is whether that is good enough. And that's a question that's gathered interest over recent years, as honourable members have said, with the police crime sentencing and courts consultation firstly, and then the amendments tabled by the right honourable member for Exeter, which would have seen a new offence of failing to stop or report accidents where the driver knew that the accident had caused serious or fatal injury, or where they ought reasonably to have realised that it might have done so. And I hope the Government will consider the right honourable member for Exeter's amendment during the bill. He will certainly have my support in that, as he does with many others in the House today. It's the disparity in the sentencing for failure to stop death or serious injury by careless or dangerous driving that's led to honourable members today suggesting that there is a perverse incentive for people to flee the scene of an accident. And this has been heard before and again today, where, as honourable members have explained, that if a driver under the influence of drink or drugs kills someone and remains at the scene, the likelihood is that they'll be tested, charged and prosecuted for that offence. However, if they flee the scene and have time to sober up, and there is no other evidence of careless or dangerous driving, then they can only be prosecuted for the minor offence of failing to stop or report an accident. And that is something that we really must deal with going forward. Now, Mr Rosendale, just 2 months ago, on the 11th of September, 18-year-old Aidan Pilkington was struck by a car and killed on Crow Road in Glasgow. The driver of the car fled the scene. Aidan was about to move to Dundee to attend university, and he was so well loved by his friends that they kept a daily vigil at the spot Aidan was killed for over 3 weeks. To date, there has still not been an arrest made, and the driver, whoever they are, remains out there on the roads in the knowledge that at 2 a.m. on the 11th of September, they struck a bright, well-loved young man and ended his life. Could it be that the driver was either under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or was driving a vehicle they had no right to be in? And that is something that we really need to deal with going forward and I have the support of honourable members who are seeking a change in the law. Now, Mr Rosendale, the Scottish Government and Police Scotland are committed to reducing roads death by half over the next 10 years. This is an ambitious target, but it's commitments like this that are required to make our roads safer for us all. Deaths and serious injuries caused on our roads can often be prevented, and it is our duty to ensure that we do all we can to improve driver behaviour and educate road users. The new Road Safety Framework in Scotland sets out a vision for Scotland to have the best performance in road safety in the world by 2030. And so in closing, Mr Rosendale, while these measures go no way to achieving justice for the families who have tabled these petitions, what's happening in Scotland may go some way to ensuring we prevent tragedies like these before they happen. And I look forward to hearing from the Minister and how the Government is looking at education, improving driving behaviour and answering the calls for tougher sentencing and new laws to address the points raised in these petitions. Thank you.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr